Good afternoon. This is Devin with Professional Home Educators, and we are with Jennifer Smith, and we're talking about afternoon tea and the classics. And it's perfect because it's afternoon here. And
Yes.
my not my youngest girl, but my youngest teen. She's not quite a teen, but she's a preteen. Decided to run off and make me some tea, and I'm like, oh, yay! She loves me. She's so funny. She likes this kind of stuff. Most of my girls do. They've all had tea sets, and we're trying to incorporate some things we have not done in a long time. So hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Okay. They all come visit during the time they're all very good about visiting me. Yeah. So this, okay, so Jennifer, start us off. How do people start having afternoon tea?
Well, the easiest thing to do is to just sit down with your children, read a favorite poem, and you can drink tea and they can drink tea. If you're not tea drinkers, mom can have coffee and the kids can have lemonade, or, if you don't drink coffee or tea, drink water, drink lemonade, whatever you want. The important thing is, though, to just come away from the hustle and bustle of everyday homeschooling, sit down together, relax, and just enjoy the beauty of poetry or a chapter in a beautiful work of literature. That's what you do.
Okay, so with mamas, whether it's high school, whether it's middle school, how do they start out?
Well, before we get started, I'm going to let us just sit here together, and I'm going to read a snippet of one of my favorite poems, and it's called Red Sings from Treetop. Summer. In summer, white clink and drink. Yellow melts everything it touches. Smells like butter, tastes like salt. Green is queen in summer. Green trills from trees, cling to pup's knees, covers all with leaves, leaves, leaves. How can green be so many different greens? Red darts, jag, hovers, a blur of wings, a sequin throat. Red whispers along my finger with little beetle feet. And where is blue, humming, shimmering, snoozing in the lazy haze, dancing on water with yellow and green? In summer, blue grows new names: turquoise, azure, cerulean. Purple pours in the summer evening, one shadow at a time. So slowly I don't notice until hill, house, book in my hand, and pup's brown spots are all purple. So I'm just going to stop right there for time's sake, but this book does go through all of the seasons. And so you just want to make sure that when you do your tea time, it's not really a time for drill and skill, but in passing, you can mention those things that are included in these poems, like literary terms, such as when it says, where is blue, humming, shimmering, snoozing in the lazy haze, dancing on water with yellow and green. Well, that's personification. So just, in passing, you might want to tell your kids, oh, whenever it said blue is humming and shimmering, that's called personification. Whenever the writer or poet gives a human-like quality to something that's not actually human. But just say it once, Don't ask them, now, what is it called? And if you read a poem again, I wouldn't even ask them, but a lot of times, even when my kids were little, they would pick up stuff like that. They would say, hey, that was personification. So it's just going to be something that you want to mention in passing, so it's still a pleasurable experience. So something else I want to talk about too is tea time can be as formal as you want it to be, or it can be laid back. There are times that we get out the china and we do the whole china thing with my great grandmother's china. And this is I just show it to you really quickly. So pretty, here it is. And then I got this little tea set, which, you're going to be refilling a lot if you use this. And then, today I just have a coffee mug because I stayed up later than I should have last night. But Edgar Allan Poe is my favorite writer. So this is Poe Me a Cup. And my kids make fun of this one. But, you can use paper and plastic products if you're in a rush. You can make homemade treats if you want to, or you can grab something store-bought. It doesn't need to be something that you stress over. You're going to do it once a week, but if you don't get to it one week, it's not the end of the world. And I can tell you some weeks we did get to it, some weeks we didn't. And I can also tell you that every week it was not homemade treat. Okay, sometimes it was tea, sometimes it was coffee, sometimes it was just getting together and reading the poem, because we weren't, you're not always going to be in the mood for something to eat or drink. It's yours, make it yours. Now, as far as classics go, actually classical education is those works by Greek and Roman authors, such as the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah.
And hey, hello, how are you? And so, of course, yes, we did read the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I just want to tell you too that, reading the classic is important, but everything you read does not have to be what's technically considered a classic. I actually looked up the definition of a classic, and according to Merriam-Webster, classics are works of art of recognized and established value. So your family may have a certain book that's recognized and established as having value to you. And that, in my opinion, is a classic. And you don't want your children to hate literature or to hate classics. So it's perfectly fine for you to detour a little bit from what's standard classic literature. Because what you're wanting to do is to give your children tools for understanding poetry, tools for understanding literature, and a love of literature and a love of poetry. And you're also giving them the exposure to those things. So when you expose them to it, you want them to love it. And that's the beauty of tea time, is it's a short time once a week. It's a time to, like I said earlier, come away from that hustle and bustle, drill and skill of homeschool life, and just to spend time enjoying each other. It's in a relaxing environment, and plus you get snacks. So everybody likes snacks. If you have several age ranges from, let's say, I have, my oldest right now is 27 and my youngest child is 11. So many of you probably have a wide age range as well. You can do tea time together and you can do it separately, whichever you prefer. What worked for me was to do some together and then some separately, because I suggest if you do some separately, then you also need to come together at least once a month for tea time, because it needs to be a family experience, because great poetry and great literature can be enjoyed by people of all ages. So make sure that you do come together at least once a month. And certainly there will be poems and there will be literature that your high schooler's reading that your kindergartner would not understand or appreciate. But you just, you can schedule that time for everyone to be together and for everyone to come and appreciate something. And a great resource for those poets that everyone can look at together and everyone can appreciate it would be amblesideonline.org, because they organize their poets according to different quarters. So they don't do it by age. So you can go again to amblesideonline.org and they have poetry, and it'll go for all ages. Now, certainly some of their poems you may think, well, my kindergartner is not going to understand that. Well, they don't necessarily have to completely understand it to appreciate the beauty. I know last time I talked about this poem called The Children's Hour, and I believe it's by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Again, it's The Children's Hour by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And for some reason, when my middle two children were in elementary school, they thought it was a creepy poem. Because I don't know if they had seen something about, some kids who were creepy or what. But, they totally had their own take on that poem. So it's an interesting poem to read now, because once I got their perspective on it, I read it from their perspective and I'm like, okay, I can see now why they might have thought of it in that way. So, kids have a funny way of looking at stuff sometimes. So that's a good resource though, amblesideonline.org. Also, your tea time could be focused sometimes on artists or composers, and Ambleside also has those lists as well. So if you're interested in poets, artists, and composers, check out Ambleside, and it is a Charlotte Mason style website. So there's a great deal also of classic literature on that site as well. All right, I have, like I said, these notes, so I'm just, wanting to make sure I cover everything. For sometimes you can have special occasions for your tea time where you actually have parties. Now, I don't do these once a week or once a month. I probably do these maybe twice a year. I go all out and have a big party. For example, October of 2017, we did a big Edgar Allan Poe party in October. We studied his poetry and his literature. And around Halloween, because that's a fitting time for Edgar Allan Poe, we had a big Poe party. And I will try to link that to professional home educators when we get done today. But we did food, we did art related to his poetry. My parents came, we dressed up, we did poetry readings, we just we decorated, we had just so much stuff, and it was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun, and it took a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. My kids, they were teenagers, so they were kind of like, but they enjoyed it. You can tell in the pictures they enjoyed it. Some other ideas you can do if you like Lord of the Rings. One of my kids is a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and we spent 1 year for her British lit. Part of what we did was to go through all of the Lord of the Rings, and there is an actual curriculum for Lord of the Rings, and I don't have it anymore. I sold it, but I cannot remember what the company is, but I found it by Googling Lord of the Rings homeschool curriculum, and I will find that too. I'll try to find that, and I'll link that also, because it was very thorough and very in-depth with literary terms. It also tied into Greek mythology and I believe Norse mythology, because a lot of that is what inspired J.R.R. Tolkien. So it was not just about Lord of the Rings. There was so much in-depth study to it beyond just Lord of the Rings. And I was kind of concerned, like, is this going to make her hate Lord of the Rings now because she's got to go through all this other stuff? But actually, it didn't. It made her love Lord of the Rings all the more and be even more fascinated by J.R.R. Tolkien. So if your child has an interest in something, please let your child pursue that. And that's something else I want to talk about. My other teen, when he was, I guess, probably about 11 or 12, he started reading Percy Jackson. And at one point I was a bit of a Charlotte Mason purist, and I am no longer like that. Haven't been for a while, and that's one thing I'm going to talk more about Julie Bogart, who does the Brave Writer materials. But she said something really profound in her book, The Brave Learner, about not being tied to an ideology, that is not what should control us. And that's so freeing, that we're not tied to this ideology. We are free to do what's best for our children and what we judge, because just like our, name of this group is Professional Home Educators. I mean, we are professional at what we do. We know our children better than anybody else. And so, like I said, he started reading Percy Jackson, which, if you're not familiar with Percy Jackson, it's a book about a boy who finds out his father is a god, a Greek god. And what that series did for my son was to really pique his interest in mythology. And he wanted to read every Percy Jackson book that came out. Then there was actually a book that the author, Rick Riordan, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, is Riordan. So I guess Riordan. But he wrote a book that was about the Greek god, that wasn't part of the actual story of Percy. And so my son wanted that book, and then he loved the Allairs. I don't know if I'm saying that either, book of Greek myth. Then when he got older, he was thrilled, absolutely thrilled this past year to read the Iliad and the Odyssey. So you never know what is going to pique your child's interest. So let them pursue those interests. And it gives them tools and it gives them experience for, reading things that they'll have to read in high school and then in college if they go. And even if they don't pursue college, I mean, how many times are we in conversations that reference Greek mythology? I mean, that's just, that's common. So just to be a part of conversation, it's important. You could have a Greek mythology party. We, when I taught at a co-op, we actually did that. We brought in some Greek foods and we had a feast and we talked all about the different gods and goddesses. And so that's something else you do. Like I said, when you want to do a little something extra with your tea time. Another idea, if you like the Chronicles of Narnia, a fun tea time extra would be to have a Christmas or a winter party, depending on which, part of the line, the Witch in the Wardrobe you're at. Is Aslan there or is he not? Because if you know the story, when it's winter but no Christmas, that's before Aslan comes in. But when he comes in, Father Christmas comes. So you could have, like I said, a winter party or a celebration, a Christmas party when Aslan comes, and Father Christmas is there and gives the children the gifts. And I don't know, maybe somebody could dress up like the White Witch and hand out some Turkish delight. That's up to you. There's also, Alice in Wonderland. You could have Mad Hatter's tea party. You could do Harry Potter and have a Harry Potter party with a sorting hat. And you could have butterbeer. You got to have butterbeer. I think it's Jelly Belly that makes the Bertie Bott's every flavor bean. I know we've gotten some before, and if you're brave, you can have some of those strangely flavored ones. So, use your imagination. You pick and choose, what books your children are really interested in, and what you might want to do for a big party, going all out. Something that I'm going to do this year, and I'd like to do it on a large scale and have all of you that are interested attend, is a Great Gatsby Roaring 20s party. My son is going to be reading The Great Gatsby this year. And so instead of a regular tea time, I would, I'll be throwing an actual complete with decor, dress, all of that. I'm going to be a flapper. I just think they're the coolest thing. And I get that. They're kindred spirits to me, I feel like. So I'm going to be doing that just to bring the Roaring 20s to life. So I'll be keeping y'all updated with that. And also, some other ideas that I like for tea time. It doesn't always have to be in the afternoon. Maybe mornings are better for your tea time. Maybe evenings are better. Something really really cool to do is midnight tea time. And if you can do it at midnight, it's really great. If you have to do it a little earlier, than midnight, if you can't stay up that late, then that's fine too. But there's just something really neat about your house after dark. if you have all the lights off, there's just something that, it just looks different. There's a different feel to it. And especially, if you have teenagers who may be a little reluctant about some of this tea time stuff, try this. Try a midnight poetry or a midnight reading of a chapter in your book by candlelight. Now, you may have to light a lot of candles if, you have trouble seeing, with age. Sometimes our vision is, not so good, but you do a midnight reading. And so some great material to read at midnight would be Edgar Allan Poe. You could read Frankenstein, Dracula, depending on, how you are about different, feelings or beliefs. Stephen King has great works to read at midnight. But you just come, sit down at your table, have candlelight, and read for a little while around midnight. Something else you can do is to have themed poetry or literature, depending on the month. You can spend that month studying African American poets and writers in February, female poets and writers in March. You might want to spend Christmas studying and learning in December, about poetry that's about the Christmas season. Winter, you might want winter poetry. During fall, poems about the fall season. You can focus like that if that's something that you're interested in. Also, don't feel like you're the one that always has to come to the table with something. Let your children be a part of it. Don't make it so much like an assignment, but make it something that they would be interested in. Tell them, hey, whatever book you're reading, whether it's a book for school or a book they're reading for pleasure, tell them, come to tea time this week with a quote that you really like from your book. Let's just talk about it. Why do you like it? Ask them sometimes to come with their favorite song. Because, songs are just poetry set to music. And let them bring whatever song it is that they want to bring. Now, some of you may be a little more strict than others about music. My kids, well, one of them just graduated, so she's 18, and my other, child is 16. And I don't censor their music. We talk about it, what they're listening to. I listen to it. We talk about it. We discuss things. That's something else that Julie Bogart, the Brave writer, curriculum writer, talks about in her book Brave Learner. She talks about having big juicy conversations at tea time and when you're discussing literature, because literature often brings up a lot of heavy topics, and your children may have and likely will have different opinions from you on many things. And when you're in that safety net of discussions about literature, it's a little easier for them to talk to you about things than it is if you're just having a regular conversation. So my belief is being open and honest with my kids and letting them be open and honest with me is best. And the way that we connect. And so I'm fine with what they bring and we talk about it. And that's another important part of tea time, is just having that connection with your children. And like I said earlier, coming away from the busyness of daily life and just really getting to know each other. So you can, let them bring their quotes they like, their songs, poems they like, poems they've written. I'm a poet, and so sometimes my children write poetry too. So sometimes we might bring our own poetry to tea time and talk about it. Something else you can do is to actually talk about songs that are from poetry. Fleetwood Mac has a song, Annabelle Lee, which is the poem. The song is, exactly the poem, Annabelle Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. There's The Lighthouse's Tale by Nickel Creek, which is the lighthouse from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. So you can take that too, because you can also just Google, songs based on poetry. There are several listed at a website called the Literary Maven. And so you could just Google, and I'll try to share that later too, but it's the Literary Maven, and it's called Poem Song Pairing. Something else is making things fun for your kids. And on that note, I'm going to talk a little bit about Shakespeare and how I've made Shakespeare more fun and more interesting for my children. I'm reaching over here to get something. If you see me looking away, that's what I'm getting, is some things. But this is a really fun book, and it's called Pop Sonnet, and it's by Eric Didrikson. And what this book is Shakespeare's spin on modern day songs. So it's as if Shakespeare wrote songs from recent times. How would he phrase things? So I'm going to just go over one with you. And how I do this with my kids is I read the sonnet, and then they try to guess what song it is. When first we fell apart, I filled with fear that life without thy love could not be led. But through my long reflection on my tears, I filled myself with courage in its stead. Yet thou returnest, and for my love implore, with weary sadness hung upon thy brow. Oh, how I would have bolted tight my door, if I had known thou'dst be returning now. But without bolt I beckon thee to leave. Thou hast no welcome place, and thus must go. Thou hast fled, and then expected me to grieve, and crumble like the walls of Jericho. Yet I shall live and boldly rise above, so long as I know how to give my love. So I'm sure a lot of you know what that is, but that's I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. So my kids get, pretty hysterical and laughter at some of them, especially the one by Sir Mix-a-Lot, which a lot of you probably know what I'm talking about too, but there is a Shakespeare version of a song by Sir Mix-a-Lot, so maybe y'all can figure out what song that is. So there is a way to make everything fun, and that's another point. I'm going to reference Julie Bogart, Brave Writer, and she said that we should make a promise to ourselves never to teach anything that we find boring. Now, does that mean, yay, I don't ever have to teach economics? No, that's not what it means. She said to keep at something, keep studying something until we find something exciting, something interesting in that. And that was profound for me. I bring up economics because that's my least favorite subject. I find it dull and boring. But I did, I went to Pinterest, I looked it up, I found lessons using the Hunger Games and lessons using The Office to teach economics. So you can do the same thing. If you find poetry boring, you find classical literature boring, you can find something about those things that piques your interest, because your kids need to see your enthusiasm before they're going to be enthusiastic. And that's what tea time can do. You're going to sit there, you're going to find some poetry. Where can you find these ideas? Okay, I'm going to give you some ideas here, other than the ones we've talked about. There's a website called Pages Unbound. It's actually a WordPress. It's actually a blog. Pages Unbound. And one of the posts they have is a matchup for classic. And it's called, it's just Pages Unbound at WordPress. And the post is classic matchup. And I'm going to try to remember, like I said, I'm going to get on when I'm done with this and link, put the link on Professional Home Educators. But it's a post about, if you like this classic, then try this other book. But you can do it, vice versa. If there's a modern book you like, try the classic that it's talking about. And you can, find that way to match up something classic that you will, possibly enjoy. So try that. There are movies. A lot of the classics have movies. This year for American literature, my son is reading The Great Gatsby. He's reading The Outsiders. He's reading Tom Sawyer, Fahrenheit 451, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and To Kill a Mockingbird. I have the movies for those. Now, most of the time I'm an advocate for watching the movie after you read the book, but if you're struggling or your kids are struggling with classic, then it's okay. It's perfectly okay if you need to watch the movie first and they need to watch the movie first, but then read the book. A lot of times, and quite often the movie is a little different from the book, or even a lot different at times, but it's going to give you and your children enough of a background and enough knowledge of what's happening so that the book won't be as difficult. And on that note too, speaking of difficult books, you don't have to read, and your kid doesn't have to read. And there's no way you can read every classic out there. You don't have time. And the important part, as I mentioned earlier, is that you give your children the tools and the experience with classics. And you can do that by reading some of them. And if you have a book that's just too difficult and you're just like, I cannot get through this, I surely cannot expect my kid to get through this, don't. It's okay. I used to be like, I gotta finish this. It doesn't matter how awful it is, until I got to this one book that my daughter, who just graduated, I believe she was in 10th grade, and it was required for her to read this. Well, required according to the curriculum. But one thing to remember too is your curriculum is not your master, it is a tool. I'm going to say that again. Your curriculum is not your master, it is a tool. You're the teacher, you know best. Okay, but this book, I am sorry to E.M. Forster, but A Passage to India is the most dull book, in my opinion, and in my daughter's opinion as well. We got a little over halfway through, because I do believe in giving a book a chance. We gave that book more chance than it deserved. And I tried with tea time. I had the Cliff Notes, trying to understand, trying to care. That's the thing. I did not care what happened to those characters. I did not care. I just did not. So I told her, I said, that's it. We're just done. We are just done. I don't understand why this book is a classic. I can't stand it. So if you come to something like that, get rid of it if you have to. On the flip side, another classic that was difficult to read and understand, but my daughter and I ended up loving it. It took my reading the Cliff's Notes to understand a lot of it, but it was worth it. And it was so good to me, and I cried at the end, and my daughter loved it, and it's one of our favorite books now, but it's Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. I was not expecting it to be as difficult to read as it was, because I had read Great Expectations and A Christmas Carol, and those were not difficult reads, but A Tale of Two Cities was difficult. But I do, I recommend getting through some books, but not all of them. If there's just nothing redeemable for you in it, it is okay to say no. There are so many wonderful books out there. There's no reason for you to feel tortured through, and make yourself get through something, or your child, which is not to say that, sometimes your child's going to need to do something, but, not A Passage to India. And I'm sorry if that's somebody's favorite book. Please, it's nothing personal to you, but now, some other ideas for introducing your young children to classic literature. First of all, it's okay for them to read, or for you to read to them, the abridged version. I know that Charlotte Mason, purist in me, had to, take a deep breath and move on. But, they're going to get the original unabridged versions of classic literature in middle school and high school. But when they're, kindergarten, first, second grade, it's okay for them to have the abridged version of books. And Barnes and Noble and Books A Million quite often will have the little classic books, and they'll be abridged. And that's okay, because the important thing is that you're developing a love of literature in your children, a love of poetry, and a love of the classics. And you don't want to spend that tea time when you're reading to them having to explain what this word means, what that word means, And so if you're giving them, let's say, Tales from Shakespeare, then they're getting a background on Shakespeare that they can build on, so that when they get to high school, they already know the stories, and it's not such a foreign concept to them, and it won't be, so hard for them to understand and appreciate Shakespeare. As I said, you can, read. You need to read the books aloud. You can use audiobooks for your children. Now, I wouldn't do it during tea time because that's something that, that's a time where you need to be reading and interacting with your children. But if you're riding, going in your car somewhere, that's a good time for audiobooks. It's a good time to have your kids listening to poetry or, listening to the classic literature. And these ideas came from a website called Teaching with Children's Books, and the post was how to introduce classic literature to young readers. If you have a high schooler, I cannot recommend this blog to you enough. It's called nerdylittlebirdie.com. And that's, like I said, I'm gonna link all this stuff, but if you're just trying to take notes right now, Nerdy Little Birdie, NERDYLLEBIRDIE.com. It's all, lowercase all together, nerdylittlebirdie.com. Her name is Heather. She used to live in Mobile, and she's moved away, but she has 2 teenage boys now, and her blog is just loaded with wonderful ideas about teaching high school, especially literature and writing. She also has on her blog a poetry party that she did. She has something else called the bookworm party that she did, and I would highly, highly recommend looking at the bookworm party. If you use Brave Writer materials, she's got great ideas and resources with that. So check that out for sure. I also highly recommend for ideas for poetry, for your poetry tea time, that you get Julie Bogart's book called The Poetry Tea Time Companion. And you can get that at Amazon, or you can get that from her site, bravewriter.com. Now, it is very helpful for those of you just starting a poetry tea time, because this book has everything that you need. Again, that Julie Bogart, The Poetry Tea Time Companion. It's got poems in it. It's got classic poems. It's an anthology of classic poems. Each poem has a little information about the poet. It has notes about the poem, and it has just a couple of questions. Nothing too heavy. That's what I'm saying, like I was talking about earlier. You don't want to turn tea time into a drill and skill, but it's just got gentle questions just to, have you and your children discussing things with each other and making that connection during tea time. So I highly recommend that book. For literature, Julie has things called arrows and boomerangs. Now, the arrow is for younger children, and unfortunately, I did not find Julie and Brave Writer until a couple of years ago when my kids were already in high school. But since that time, I have purchased several things from Julie. I want to talk to you now a little bit about the boomerang, which is it's a literature guide. Now, it's not going to be deep and heavy. It's something that I will use in tea time coming up this year. with my son, because like I said, my daughter graduated, so I've got only one high schooler now. But I want to walk you through just a little bit of what's called the boomerang. I'm going to use the one for The Outsiders, which is the book my son chose to read first of his choices. So here's The Outsiders. Some of you may be familiar with it, but it's a story about a teenager, and it's really it's a coming of age story. It's a lot more than that, but we don't have time for me to go into it. It was one of my favorite books as a teenager. But just to talk a little bit about how a boomerang works. In week 1, Julie gives, like, I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, there's like the opening paragraph, and then she asks why this passage. And so you talk about, why did the author choose to write the things that she did in this passage? What was she trying to tell us? What was she communicating with us? And then you talk about different words, different vocabulary words that the kid might not be familiar with, but nobody's looking up definitions. There are just 3 words here. You just talk about. And then there's a little section about teaching the passage. Again, it's just short little things you want to talk about, but nothing that's going to be like this heavy, hard hitting, spending lots of time on it. Then there's, the second week, there's dialogue, and it talks about, this being a turning point, what makes this a turning point. So I think you get the idea of that. But then there's also what she calls golden lines. And golden lines are lines that your child each month would select a favorite passage from a book to keep in their notebook of golden lines. They just pick a passage, copy it to their notebook, and write the date they picked it. And then they write why this passage is meaningful to them. And I do that with my kids because I feel like it's important for them to see me write down quotes that speak to me and why they speak to me, and then we talk about it. Now it says each month select one favorite passage. I don't make my kids hold to just one passage a month. I tell them, if you see, if there's a quote in this chapter that speaks to you, write it down, write why it speaks to you. Well, let's talk about it at tea time. And then, like I said, I do the same thing. So if they don't find a quote, it's not an assignment like I talked about earlier. It's just a discussion point. So it's not something they feel like they have to do. They may find, one week they might not find a quote that speaks to them. Next week, they might find, 3 or 4 quotes. So that's the kind of thing you want to do with your literature at tea time. And boomerangs are really, really good for that. Something else I wanted to talk about too is, helps for classic literature, especially when you get to high school. And I have a lot of help with Shakespeare. So I just want to show you a few things that you can do to help you with Shakespeare. Now for Julius Caesar, I have, this is just the book. They're just Julius Caesar. This is the play. Then I have Julius Caesar. This is an all-in-one resource, and it's called Cliffs Complete. It's like Cliffs Notes, except it also has the play in the book. And you can see on this side you have the play, and on this side you have the notes. So this is a very helpful tool, and I highly recommend it for things like Shakespeare that are a little more difficult for a lot of kids to understand, because they don't have to flip back and forth between the play and their Cliffs Notes. They can look right here. Now, they're gonna have to be able to, you know, go on the honor system. As I always tell my kids, hey, you know, reading the Cliffs Notes, the old joke, is not the same as reading the actual book or the actual play. So don't even try that. But they are, Cliff Notes are helpful tools. As I said, I had to have it to understand and get the symbolism and get all the things that I needed to from A Tale of Two Cities. And this is Julius Caesar from the Folger Shakespeare Library. And that's an excellent resource. You can Google that, go online. I highly recommend being part of the Folger Shakespeare Library. It has a lot of detailed notes in it, and this is very helpful for the teacher to have. This is Shakespeare Made Easy. This is Romeo and Juliet. And these are helpful because they have side by side the Shakespeare original writing, and then over here how it would be spoken in modern English. Now, is your kid going to read Shakespeare's side and modern English? I don't know. I mean, I told my kids, you need to read this side as well as the modern English, but you can't micromanage everything they do. And so I find this helpful because they, otherwise they could be coming to you constantly. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? But here they have it translated on this side for them. So, hopefully they're going to be helping themselves by learning, Shakespeare's language by, and reading that side. This is 12th Night, which is a good one for high schoolers to read also. And this is the Poems and Sonnets of Shakespeare. And I also have Cliff's Notes for the sonnet. And this is another help called How to Read Shakespeare, Comedies, Histories, and Tragedies Explained. So if you can get your hands on things that can help you understand and help your kids understand Shakespeare, grab it up. You're going to need it. Some other things that I recommend for you personally as a teacher. I recommend this book, Teaching from Rest. Now, it is not about getting a full night's sleep, not that kind of rest, because that's, for some of us, that's just something that's probably not going to happen, especially for those of us who have children on the autism spectrum. If it's a book about how to get sleep, well, we're just not even going to look at that except to laugh at it. But this is a book about teaching without worrying, stressing over so many things, just trusting that we can do what we've set out to do with our children, which leads me into a book and a lady that I've referenced a lot, The Brave Learner by Julie Bogart. You know, something that she says in this book is there are no educational emergencies. That's one of the beauties of homeschooling, is that we have time. We don't have to rush our children through things. We don't have to be finished with, you know, teaching this concept right now. For example, my son, who is 16 now and loves to read and could read anything and has been able to read anything for several years, you know, that anything I put in front of him, you know, he was not a fluent reader until he was 8. And I didn't push it and I didn't force it. Because if I had, he would have only, you know, learned to hate reading. So it's something that we need to keep in mind, is that we're not tied to this, you know, 9-month schedule where we've got to do all this before May. We got to get them ready for the next school year. So just remember that and enjoy the time that we have with our children. But I cannot recommend this enough, The Brave Learner, Julie Bogart. Another book that Julie has, and she has these for the different seasons. This one is the one for spring, and it's called A Gracious Faith. And these are very short reading for daily reflection. And they just help you to be encouraged with your homeschooling, to be encouraged with a commitment to homeschooling, to be encouraged with the daily difficulties or doubts that you may encounter. So I encourage you to get A Gracious Faith. Like I said, she has those for the different seasons. If you're interested in Charlotte Mason style, you know, if that's your style of education or something that you would like to be your style of education, I talked about going to AmblesideOnline.org. That can be a bit overwhelming. So when you go there, just, you know, take a deep breath, go through it slowly, give yourself time, ask questions. Most of the ladies on there are very, very helpful. When you go to the, they have like their message board. So just, you know, give yourself time. You can read Charlotte Mason's original volumes. I would not start there. I would start with this book. This is called For the Children's Sake, and it's Susan Schaefer Macaulay. And what she does is really to explain the principles of Charlotte Mason in an easy to understand way. When I started off with Charlotte Mason style education, this book is the book that helped me the most to really be able to understand what it was and start putting it into practice. And then I could apply what I was seeing on Ambleside. All right. Like I said, I've got my notes, so I'm trying to make sure I don't forget anything. Some of the books that I really, really enjoyed using with my children when they were young for poetry, I just want to talk about those. I'm going to reach right over here and get them. A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a classic, and this is a great resource. My kids really love this book. They especially love the poem My Shadow. They memorized that one. When We Were Very Young by A.A. Milne. Also by A.A. Milne, Now We Are Sick. Some other good poetry books, especially if your children enjoy a good laugh, would be the ones by Shel Silverstein, like A Light in the Attic, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and then Falling Up, which is another one by Shel Silverstein. Also, the one I read at the beginning of the class, Red Sings from Treetop. That's an excellent book for teaching not only the beauty of poetry, but also the seasons and colors. So that's a really good literature that my children particularly enjoyed when they were young would be the story about Pink. They love that. Other books, The Secret Garden, The Wizard of Oz, Beatrix Potter. They love Peter Rabbit. They acted that out when they were little. That's something else you can do for tea time too. You can read a favorite story and then let your kids act it out. That's still one of my favorite memories is my kids when they were little acting out Peter Rabbit. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, that's a great one. And like we talked about earlier, you could do a tea party, do the Mad Hatter's Tea Party to go with that. For upper elementary, good poetry books are Dog Coo. It's like haiku, except it's a dog coo. And that actually teaches children how to write haiku. And then A Full Moon is Rising, All the Wild Wonders. Literature for upper elementary, some great classic literature is Island of the Blue Dolphin, The 100 Dresses, Bridge to Terabithia. If you have sensitive children, you might want to pre-read that one. The Witch of Blackbird Pond, Across 5 Aprils. That's a great one. It's about the Civil War, and it actually made me cry. I had never cried about the Civil War, but that's historical fiction. And again, it's called Across 5 Aprils, but what it did was to bring home the reality of the Civil War and make it about people and not just about dates and not just about this, history, this event that happened in the past. That's one of the things about historical fiction, which is great for tea time. If you're doing Sunlight or one of the other literature heavy curricula they have out there, let tea time sometimes be a time you read a chapter in one of those books and talk about it. Like I said, Across 5 Aprils is good, but if you're like me, you want to make some Kleenex for that one. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. That's an important book to read. It's another one. If you have sensitive children, you might, need to pre-read that and think about it. But it's something that needs to be read and something that we all need to be aware of. The topics that are dealt with. And Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Middle and high school, I put those two together because different children are ready for different topics and different concepts, at different times. A lot of middle schoolers are ready for high school materials, and on the flip side, sometimes high schoolers haven't, quite gotten to where they're ready for Shakespeare or, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So, your kid best. So these are some good suggestions for middle and high school readers. Something else that I found also doing some research is that there are a lot of colleges that are actually looking for some modern literature in book lists that those applying for college, in their list, in their book list they're actually looking for the modern literature, because apparently it shows that these kids are socially aware and have some social relevance. Now, I don't know what colleges actually ask for book lists. When my daughter was applying for colleges, they didn't ask for any kind of list of books that she read, but apparently some colleges do. So I've also, because of that reason, included modern poets and authors in this. So, and like I said earlier, classics don't always have to be these old classics. So just keep that in mind. Poetry that I suggest for middle and high school would be Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman, Robert Frost, Sylvia Plath, Langston Hughes, T.S. Eliot, Maya Angelou, John Keats, Rupi Kaur, William Wordsworth, Mary Oliver, William Blake, Rumi, Amanda Lovelace, which you have to use your discretion on her, because she has some language and some pretty heavy stuff she deals with. Laurie Halse Anderson, same. John Murillo, same. And Shakespeare's sonnet. Literature, The Outsiders, The Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, Call of the Wild, The Color Purple, Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities, A Christmas Carol, Edith Hamilton's Mythology, The Iliad, The Odyssey, Les Mis, Brave New World, Metamorphosis, 1984, Animal Farm, All Quiet on the Western Front, Frankenstein, Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Macbeth, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, One Day in the Life of Ivan Desinovich, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Chronicles of Narnia series, Of Mice and Men, The Pearl, The Handmaid's Tale, The Book Thief, The Kite Runner, The Glass Castle, and Speak. Now, I have a lot of these books that we're talking about. I wanted to show you something else too. With To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm going to be using some curriculum from Memoria Press. Again, that's Memoria Press. And sometimes I use their literature guides, and they have the student book, which is like this, it's spiral bound here, and then they have the teacher guide like this. Now, I don't do everything like this, and this is definitely going to be separate from my tea time. When we do To Kill a Mockingbird, it's going to be strictly literature class time, because we're going to be doing some heavy study and heavy working with that. Now, this classic book is the one we are going to be diving into the deepest this year, as you'll be able to tell as I talk about some of the questions that I'll be asking with this. Because, you do need to really dive in with the classics. Sometimes, you've got to hit that a little bit harder. So, for example, some of the comprehension questions will be things like, what changes does Scout observe in Jim's behavior, and how does she deal with it? Who helps her deal with this, and how? include a quotation in your answer. Because once your kids get older, and you can even start it younger, and that's one thing that the golden lines and boomerang help with is finding quotes and talking about why you like them. But one thing they're going to need to be able to do in high school, and then if they go to college, is to be able to use quotes to back up their opinions with facts when they're writing papers. So when you're teaching classics, you want to tie that in with their writing when they're doing their writing. So like I said, that's not something I'll be doing at tea time, but that's something that is important for teaching classics during the actual literature time. And I think that's about it. Just some closing thoughts I have are, don't be afraid to think outside the box, get out of your comfort zone. One of the things that we did was to attend a poetry talk at the Haunted Bookshop a few months ago. And that was something that we enjoyed. My husband even went, and it was really interesting. The leader of the poetry talk was a professor, or is a professor at the University of South Alabama, a professor of literature. And what she did was use a song to teach poetry and to teach how to analyze and think about poetry. And so, do things like that, go outside the box, think about different things. With your tea time in poetry, you don't always have to be sitting at your kitchen table. Some books and poems lend themselves really well to going outside and having a picnic for poetry tea time. Do that. We've had some really nice times outside. Of course, I don't think you want to do it right now. Maybe in October or November, when we can actually go outside and breathe. It's a little warm out there. But do things like that, When you show curiosity and excitement, it catches on with your children. And you want to have that connection with your kids. And I want to say this final thing, and it's another quote from, guess who? Julie. And it's so true. You only get one life. And if you choose to dedicate this sizable chunk of your adult years to homeschooling, it's important that you like it. So if anybody has any questions.
Cynthia, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box if you want to. Jennifer, it's just as good as the second time as it was the first time. Even better, I think. I think it's better.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. I mean, really, you have a gift for being able to convey your ideas. And I very much appreciate it. She's listened the whole time.
Hey!
Yes, I do like homeschooling. Okay. Obviously.
Oh,
she's very sweet. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to look at the haunted bookshops.
I want to wake up at 2 a.m. and light candles.
She's got ideas.
Midnight. But if Mommy wants to do it earlier, as long as it's dark, it's good.
As long as it's dark.
Yeah.
Oh.
She says she wants to wake up at 2 a.m. She would not do it.
Well, once I get up, I'll like it. And if we turn it into a habit.
If we know it. Habit, oh my God.
A habit.
I would die.
Oh, you've been listening to Charlotte Mason, haven't you? Habit.
I like waiting here.
But I will let you help me plan a tea time. I don't know that it will be at 2 a.m.
No, that's what I have different time. That's like,
She will help me though. No, there's so many good resources. I can't wait till we get the list on the thing. I was trying to take notes, but I was like, I fell behind. So if you'll just put your notes
I will.
on the group, then we can at least maybe jog our memory. But I'm so thankful today that you did this. And I mean, it was some good stuff. I know Elizabeth dropped off and will have to come back. And Corey, she was here and her phone went dead. She goes, it went dead.
Oh.
So they're going to come back and watch. Cynthia, I don't know if you can hear. Has she got any questions? Anything to say?
No, I'm good.
Hey,
Okay. She's good. See, I just don't know.
what's your favorite color?
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color is green.
Great.
What's yours?
Yellow.
Yellow is big in the house right now.
Oh, yellow and white.
Yellow and white. And mine, the big almost joke in the family is Mama's favorite color changes almost every day.
Yeah.
But green and blue are pretty high up toward the top. These people right here is why I do professional
I've done
home
this a
educators
long-
right
I've
here.
been doing eyebrows up and down for a long time.
Okay, my mamas, we're going to wrap this up and I'll turn this off. Jennifer is always available for questions. She is in our group. Hopefully y'all will watch this and then get as much out of it as I do because I got a lot out of it and I have a lot of ideas for the fall. Even thinking of ways on how to incorporate the baby so that, well, she's not really a baby, she's 4. And
Oh.
she's a very
That's a toddler.
sassy, well, she'll be 4 in 2 or 3 weeks, okay? She's almost 4. But she's a very sassy almost 4. It's really kind of funny because I keep saying she's acting more and more 4 every day. And it's that level that I don't know, this little, she's 4, she acts, she's 4. She's basically there. And there's a lot of sass. Probably more sass than any other kid I've ever had. So she's a lot of fun. Olivia
Sounds
was
like Hope when she was that age. Hope
yeah,
was strong-willed. Still is.
yeah. Olivia, not so much sass. Now, yes, but not when she was that age. She's making faces at me. But I'm going to turn this off because, I mean, it's just, let's see. Okay.